Actually, this is a good topic because this came from a discussion Carrie Driscoll and I had in one of our first meetings at Toastmasters. Carrie, among other things in her life, was a librarian in Orlando, Florida for a period. And besides Carrie, I have other friends who are librarians, and you run into some interesting folks at the public library. And she was telling me a story one day about a patron who was berating her because library fines are unconstitutional. I looked at the Constitution one more time. I've read it a few times. I didn't see anything in there about there shall be no library fines. And so this goes on to another general subject and a general feeling I've had is that we do not teach civics education in the United States anymore. It is something that has been underemphasized. When my parents went to high school back in the 1960s, civics was a part of the high school education and even up to in elementary and in middle school before that. By the time I went to the high school in the 1990s, civics education was not taught. And so tonight we're going to look at the problems, what happens when you don't teach civics education. We're going to talk a little bit about solutions. But more importantly, I have freebies for everybody too. The problem is that, especially in education today, we teach to the test, the standardized tests. If you watch anything about education today, public education, it's what are the school's test scores? How are the schools performing in science, math, and reading? Unfortunately, there is no standardized test for civics education. And as a result, because the schools tend to teach to the test, because after all, that's how they get the money, that's where the incentives are, they tend to take other subjects and push them aside. The Institute for Education Services, which is a nonprofit educational think tank, began in the late 1990s performing a survey of civics education in the American school place. In 1998, they did their initial survey, and 48% of high school seniors thought the phrase, from each according to his ability to each according to his need, was contained within the United States Constitution. Does anybody know where that actually is from? Rob.
Karl Marx.
Very good. And they have periodically done this survey every few years since. In fact, the most recent survey in 2010 shows that the 12th graders' comprehension of what the three branches of government are, the significance of a constitutional amendment, how government even works or many times doesn't work, has fallen sharply. It's simply a subject that is not emphasized. At the same time, since about the late 1990s, we've seen a surge in young people voting and registering to vote and participating in the democratic process. And that's a very good thing. It's good to have people engaged. But how good are you as a voter, no matter what your political beliefs are, if you don't understand the fundamentals, if you don't understand the rules of the game? And that is why somebody like me who deals with the law every day am particularly concerned. Just this past week in Great Britain, which does not have a Bill of Rights, does not have a written constitution, Parliament has agreed to pass a law that essentially censors the press, where the government can censor the press. And Great Britain used to be one of the bastions of liberty, but because they don't have that document, it seems that they're just simply forgetting what their principles are. Back during one of the budget debates earlier in the year, a leading constitutional law professor wrote an editorial in the New York Times saying, let's just ignore the Constitution because it was getting in the way of what the President and Congress wanted to do. Why don't we just ignore it? It doesn't really mean anything. It's an old piece of paper. But let's then just kind of keep important the things we think are important. It doesn't really work that way. And I think a lot of this has created what I like to call low information voters or low information citizens, people that are not engaged in how government works or doesn't work. And because of that, it allows politicians, and it's a shame Carl's not here tonight, to have not necessarily power over people, but I think it allows us, it doesn't give us the tools that we can hold our elected officials responsible. And so that gets into the solutions of the topic tonight. And there really is no, like many things, there is no catch-all solution. But what I can advise is that if your children are in school, if your children are in school age, and the school's not doing it, give them a copy of the Constitution. Give them a copy of the Bill of Rights. Talk about American history. I mean, we all are living in the United States, everybody in this room. We all have rights, and we all need to understand how those rights are protected, what things like the court system do. How many justices are there in the Supreme Court? How much does your mayor make? How much does your city councilman make? What do they do with all the tax money that they collect? These are questions that you as a citizen that votes should take an active interest in, because it's only being an informed voter can you make good decisions at the ballot box. And it also means you're less susceptible to some of the blarney that Howard was talking about earlier. The other thing you can do is to support organizations such as the Civics Education Initiative or the Institute for Education Studies, which are trying to get school districts to think about, in addition to bringing civics back into the classroom, other subjects that we kind of forget in the standardized test world. These are important issues. And so Carrie back there has agreed to help me. She's going to pass out copies of the Constitution, and I have 2 freebies for you tonight. First of all, I have the pocket Constitution that contains the Declaration of Independence, and it also has all the important amendments. And second of all, compliments of the Secretary of State of the state of Missouri is the Missouri Constitution, which I think is kind of funny. This is the United States Constitution. This is the Missouri Constitution. This is a topic for another subject that we won't get into. But these are important documents. Sorry, Jerry, I couldn't get the Illinois. Lisa Madigan didn't get back to me. I couldn't get the Illinois Constitution. But these are important documents that you should, if you haven't read them in a few years, take a little bit of interest in doing it. See what they are. I was joking one day with somebody about the Third Amendment, and I couldn't even remember what the Third Amendment was. And so these are helpful documents to have. And it all comes back to the issue that civics education is important. Whether you decide to vote or not, or even if you just happen to be living in the United States, you have constitutional rights. There are things the government can and can't do. There are ways to protect liberty, but the most important way to protect liberty and our way of life is to be armed with the facts and to know what government can do, know what government shouldn't be doing, and use these to make informed decisions and to engage others in a discussion about where the government or where our civic lives should be. After all, you don't want to be the crazy person at the library stating that library fines are unconstitutional. Mr. Toastmaster.